It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. First, shout out to our friends at xmartial.com, makers of fine t-shirts such as this one, and all kinds of great training equipment. Go check them out at xmartial.com, and don't forget to use my code Ramsey10 for 10% off everything on the website. Our question today comes from Milo Fitness 7726, who says, "You talked about what was legal a few times before, but there are some moves I can think of that are crippling." He's talking about legal moves in MMA and moves that are illegal, fouls, and so on in the sport of mixed martial arts according to the unified rules of MMA. So he says, why? I can think of a few moves that are crippling and legal, and I've never seen them done. Why don't we see them at all, other than that they are all super psychopathic? Number one, cheese grating someone's face on walls of the octagon or hitting their head against it since it's metal. Okay, let's talk about that. Cheese grate, like grabbing someone's head and like rubbing it up and down the chain link fence. Why don't we see that in MMA? Well, there's a very simple reason. That would only ever happen if the other guy wasn't fighting back at all. And if the other guy's not fighting back, he's no longer intelligently defending himself, meaning the fight is over, meaning the referee steps in and stops the match. If you have an opponent so helpless that you could do anything, you could grab him by the hair and start rubbing his face up and down the fence, you have better options that are like a million times better. And honestly, what's the worst that's going to happen if you rubbed somebody's face up and down a chain link fence? You'd give them a nice little rash on their skin. That wouldn't be particularly damaging. That would just be like, that would be a bully move more than anything. And again, nobody who is any good at fighting, who is conscious, is going to allow that to happen. It won't happen. It won't. Did I mention it won't? All right, number two. Fish hooking is illegal, but that still leaves you with grabbing someone's cheek or their stomach and chest if they have more fat, and using them as grips. It would let you throw them and rip their skin off at the same time. All right. Grabbing, twisting, raking, and tearing the flesh is illegal. That is a foul in the sport of MMA. So if you grab a chunk of skin and start trying to rip it off, that is in fact a foul in the sport of MMA. So no, now I want to see how this would play out. Grabbing somebody by the fat rolls and throwing them with your finger strength. That's a throw I now want to see. I want to see how that's even physically possible. Grabbing somebody by their cheeks. Let me throw you by the cheeks. You have an interesting imagination, my friend. Number three, the legality of kicks to support knees. The legality of kicks to the knee suggests, and if you don't know, kicking the knee is perfectly legal. You can kick the knee in any way you want in the sport of MMA. Legality of kicks to the knee suggests that fast breaks are to some degree legal. Well, of course they are. In stand-up, they're just not easy to do. In stand-up, couldn't you use a karate middle block, hi-yah, to an elbow? In theory, you could. It's not legal. It's just not something that is high percentage. So if you want to do a karate middle block to break someone's elbow, here's how you would do it. Somebody grabs your wrist crossbody in a crossbody fashion. They hold on and they will not let go. So you do exactly what the form shows. Pull the hands up here and then hi-yah, do the hikite, pull this one down and chop the elbow in the middle. I have never sparred with an MMA fighter, with anybody with a modicum of decent training, who would allow you to do that and who was dumb enough to just hold on for dear life and not let go to the point where you could get that standing armbar. Now, we do have a few examples of standing joint locks in the UFC, specifically John Jones. John Jones is really the only guy I can think of who did it, and even then he didn't get the tap. And it wasn't the middle block, it was a whizzer over the top and cranking the shoulder. And his opponent managed to get out, still injured his shoulder, but we didn't get a tap and we didn't see a break. Now, we do see some situations where breaks happen. I didn't even finish reading this part of the question. We see situations where people don't tap and their limbs do break. Remember when Hoist Gracie fought Matt Hughes? Matt Hughes caught him in a shoulder lock. Hoist didn't tap. Break. Do you remember when Frank Mir fought Nogueira and Nogueira didn't tap? This bone right there broke. Do you remember when Ronda Rousey fought Miesha Tate? Miesha wouldn't tap to the armbar and your elbow bent backwards the wrong way. It was gross, man. This is something that does happen. So, unlike in the gym where we're being nice to each other and we apply the submission moves nice and slow, giving our partners plenty of time to tap out, in fights, people are not always that nice or that courteous. So this is something that does happen, but you seem to be operating under the assumption that people don't fight back and don't intelligently defend themselves in fights and simply stand there like dummies, or it's a game of Mortal Kombat where you deplete the health of your opponent and then the voiceover guy is like, finish him, and then they just stand there like, oh, and you do a fatality on them, completely undefended. No, people fight back in fights. That's why we call them fights. Anyway, let me finish reading this question. So the legality of kicks to the knee suggests that fast breaks are to some degree legal. Yeah, they're not illegal in stand-up. And couldn't you use a karate middle block in theory, but in reality not really? Standing chicken wing, John Jones did it. Neck crank, yeah, you can totally do neck cranks. It's legal, yes. And we've seen fights end with neck cranks. Do you remember Khabib and Conor McGregor? But that wasn't quick and snappy. No, because Conor was fighting back. And when we see a guy who knows how to fight, fighting back, it's not all quick and snappy. It's not the ninja neck snap from the movies. And I still haven't finished reading this. Or a kick to the knee, inside some clinching position. Yeah. There's also a big misunderstanding about kicks to the knee. There's this myth perpetuated by McDojos across America that if you kick someone in the knee, it'll snap in half and they'll just crumple. And there are so many hundreds of examples of people being kicked in the knee in the UFC, in ONE FC, in professional MMA shows across the world, and the fight continues and the dude's knee doesn't snap. Sure, it's not nice. It injures people. There's cumulative damage, etc., but it's very rare to see the knee just snap in that situation. But there's more. Or a judo throw done in such a way that would place a lot of pressure on one elbow, so you would deal heavy permanent damage to the joints. Yeah, man, heavy permanent damage to the joints happens in fights, man. I had a fight where I got some heavy permanent damage to this shoulder, where the dude cranked on a Kimura really fast, and it tore up my shoulder joint, and it's never completely healed, and it's given me problems. So, yeah, it's legal. It happens. It doesn't happen in reality the way it happens in your imagination. I think you seem to be imagining the movement patterns we see in movies that are really quick and snappy, like you watch a Tony Jaa movie and he kicks people in the knees and it's like we hear celery and carrots breaking. The Foley artists are doing a nice little job of making those fun little sound effects, and the guys buckle over and scream, ah, buddy, ah. And the reality is very different looking from how it looks in the movies. Neck cranks in real life don't look like they do in the movies. Bone breaks don't look like they do in the movies in real life. It's very different looking. I've seen people break their bones in fights, break their joints in fights, etc., etc., and it doesn't look like it does in the movies. But there's more. Nerve points. Points while on the ground. They wouldn't be easy to do, but they wouldn't put you in danger of countering. They are fast, and if done right, they would be both super painful, and they would paralyze a limb for some time and possibly leave more permanent damage. I have a feeling that you are probably a fan of Batman and the Batman animated films that Warner Brothers has put out, some of which are quite excellent. And there is one, I did a review of it on this channel, where Batman does some jiu-jitsu techniques on his opponent, but before that, he does this finger jab to the guy's arm. The guy's like, I can't move my arm. Is it possible to hit someone in a nerve cluster around here? There's a big nerve cluster right there in the armpit, and if you hit it really hard, probably not a finger jab, but hit it really hard, yeah, you can do some nerve damage, and it is possible to make the guy feel like, I don't want to move my arm so much right now because it hurts or it's slightly paralyzed, but it's not something you can just calculate, like, I'm going to jab these fingers right there, like in that Sherlock Holmes movie or Batman movies where it's just like you push the right buttons and then the person turns off. Nope. Look, do you know how many nerve clusters there are in the face alone and how many of those you activate with a single punch? Every time you hit someone, that's pressure point fighting. That is pressure point fighting to an extreme degree. People don't have little off switches. Contrary to what the acupuncturists and acupressurists and people who preach about if you attack spleen 4 and stomach 15 and gallbladder 7, which for some reason is in the arm, then you'll just shut him down, and then you'll have to revive him by patting him on the back and giving him a nice little massage, and then the unconscious man will come to, what happened? I'm sorry, Milo Fitness. It probably sounds like I'm making fun of you, and it's not you, it's not personal. It's just I hear comments like this a lot, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about the way the human body works, a lot of misunderstandings about the way fights work, etc. I just want to get to the fact of the matter here. So, we got nerves all over the body. Different people are going to act very differently when we hit them. Okay? Somebody who is very big and very strong and has a lot of extra padding over those nerves is going to act very different than a small, weak person where you can dig your fingers right into it. Number 5. Spiking is illegal. That is true, and if you don't know what spiking is, it is lifting your opponent up in an upside-down fashion and driving their head directly downward into the mat, aka a pile driver. It is not throwing somebody with a conventional throw that is not a pile driver and having them hit their head on the floor because they didn't break fall correctly. I saw today a highlight reel of this kid who competes in jiu-jitsu tournaments, and he's doing a collar drag, a really nice and common and popular technique, and he's winning lots of matches, setting up his takedowns with this collar drag. And in this highlight, there were 5 instances where the kids did not tuck their chins, they did not roll, they did not fall correctly, and they face planted on the ground after the collar drag. And I just knew somebody in the comments was going to say, hey, that's spiking, that's illegal. No, it's not. It is not. Do you remember when Rose Namajunas fought Jessica Andrade, however you say her last name? And Jessica went for a high crotch lift, and Rose was trying to scramble to get a Kimura. And the nature of the high crotch lift is, if you're not falling correctly, you're probably going to face plant or land on your head. And Rose landed on her head, and people were like, that's spiking. No, it's not. And some people tried to excuse it by saying, well, she was working for a submission, so it's legal to slam her. That's ADCC rules, not UFC rules. In UFC rules, you can slam an opponent anytime you want, as much as you want. You may not do a pile driver. That's spiking. Anyway. Number 5. Spiking is illegal. True. But could you take someone into a fireman's carry? Yes. And instead of throwing them normally in such a way they would land on their back, okay, you do it in such a way that they would slip down on your shoulder and fall straight on their heads. A similar thing could be done with some other judo throws. Look, dude, You can throw people in any fashion that you want, except for the pile driver, and if they fail to fall safely and protect their neck and tuck their chin and do all the stuff you're supposed to do when you are falling and tumbling, that is on your opponent. The onus to protect yourself is on you, not your opponent. Remember, rule number 1 of all fighting is protect yourself at all times. Every good referee who is doing his job correctly will say that to the fighters. Protect yourself at all times. Number 1, listen to my commands at all times. Are you ready? Are you ready? If the fighters don't understand those 2 simple things, listen to the ref and protect yourself, they're not ready. And they shouldn't be in that cage fight. So, yeah, you can do a weird, goofy fireman's carry and drop the dude. And if he lands on his head, okay, that's a tragic thing for him. But it's not illegal. Why don't we see it more? Because these are professional fighters we're talking about, not 7-year-olds in a jiu-jitsu tournament who faceplant when somebody collar drags them, and most of them are pretty good at falling correctly. I mean, think of so many throws where if you're not break falling correctly, if you don't know how to do a shoulder roll, etc., you will faceplant, you'll land on your head, you might break your neck. The arm spin throw, it's a great wrestling technique. Some judo guys use it as well. It's a beautiful technique. You get under the guy's arm, you whip around, you roll, and he spins with you, and it's this cool looking move. If the guy being thrown does not tuck his chin and go with the roll, if instead he sticks his head up like, where am I going, and tries to fight the roll, he's going to get injured. He's going to faceplant. He's going to crank his neck. He's going to get hurt. And this is a technique that is legal in wrestling for children. Yeah. Should we ban being dumb in fights and doing dumb things in fights, like not intelligently protecting yourself? Well, that's rule number 1. Protect yourself at all times. Tuck your chin when you're going down, friends. Number 6, striking with the middle knuckles. The middle knuckles. Which ones? We got these ones? Or are you talking about like these joints? Are you calling these joints knuckles? These are the knuckles. This is the 3rd joint of the finger. Okay, anyway. So, let's see where you're going with this. Striking with the middle knuckles, while worse than using a padded fist, could be used to attack the throat or cut the face. Okay. Alright, so I assume you mean like hitting somebody with this. Could you cut the face with that? In theory, yeah. Can you strike the throat? Striking the throat is technically a foul. However, there is a by rule to that. In the stand-up portion of the fight, if a strike lands to the throat, to the front of the neck, it is to be considered a fair and legal blow. You actually have to go out of your way to get fouled for striking the neck. Generally, it's if it happened on the ground and you're pushing the guy's neck up and punching him probably more than once in that very specific spot, making it very obvious that you are all about breaking that rule. I've never, ever seen anyone fouled for striking the throat, but I have seen a lot of people punched and kicked and elbowed in the throat in MMA fights. It happens a lot. It happens pretty often. And once again, in a striking exchange in the stand-up portion of the fight, it is to be deemed a fair and legal blow. Do you remember that scene in Bloodsport where Frank Duke's character is being introduced to the bad guy? Oh, that's Chung Lee. He's the big bad guy. He killed a dude in the ring, side-kicked him right in the throat, and watched him die. And as a teenager, when I saw that movie for the first time, I was like, oh, whoa, that sounds so bad. Ooh, he's such a bad dude. He kicked the guy in the neck. Only an evil guy would kick somebody in the neck. Obviously, it's not nice to be kicked in the neck, but it is something that happens a lot. Now, the Jaguar fist. Ooh. I think that's what you're referring to. People call this style of striking which is a hard weapon which should be used against soft targets. You know what I use this for? I use this for finishing triangle chokes against people who are really obstinate and who are really good at keeping a space open. So you can get maybe your leg around here, but you can't get their shoulder into the other carotid artery. So you take that jaguar fist and you go and you jam it in there. You don't even have to punch them, just press. Just press. That'll finish most people. That will cut off the blood flow to the brain. And that's perfectly legal. As far as striking with this, honestly, you got better options. You know what cuts up your opponent even better and does significantly more damage, and you could put a ton more power in without risking breaking your third knuckle, or the third joint of the finger? The elbow. And it's faster, and it's just a better weapon. That's why we see elbows instead of jaguar fists. Face the wrath of the jaguar fist. It's... Look, elbows are a better weapon. They're going to open up cuts a whole lot easier. So if your goal is cut the face, use one of those. Use one of those. Use one of those. Anyway, that's the list of legal techniques that we don't see very often, and why, and some of which we actually do see pretty often, but apparently our friend here has not seen those particular fights where those things have happened. But generally, if you don't see something happening in the UFC and it's legal, it's probably not a very high percentage technique. But if you think everybody's wrong about that, then go test it out in the gym. Maybe you're onto something. Maybe you're onto something that in the last 30 years of the sport of mixed martial arts, people just have not stumbled upon yet. Maybe the secret Jaguar fist is next level MMA, and we just haven't connected the dots quite yet. That being said, thank you for watching. If you have questions for the next Q&A, just leave them in the comments down below. Now get out there and train.